morning, everyone. This is Gentle Heron, and I would like to welcome everyone to Virtual Abilities 2024 Mental Health Symposium. We hope you will enjoy your time with us today and that you will learn a lot about how the mental health of both our youth and elderly people can be supported. We know that the COVID pandemic took a tremendous toll on school-age youth's mental health. Springtide Research Institute's 2022 poll showed that almost a third of students who considered visiting a school counselor, school-based therapist, or psychologist about mental health issues said that they ended up not doing so. They didn't think their issues were big enough to bother someone with, or else they felt that they would be judged due to stigma. Even worse, 45% said they hesitated to see a therapist because their parents didn't take their concerns seriously. The elderly are at the other end of the age spectrum, and I'm part of that group, are a growing population segment. It is estimated that 20% of us have some type of mental health issue. However, less than half of these individuals receive treatment. Many older people have comorbid physical disabilities or chronic illnesses and pain, which of course can impact mental wellness. About a quarter of all elderly people are socially isolated and or lonely, which lead to mental health issues. The theme of our 2024 Mental Health Symposium emphasizes the importance of considering the mental health needs of both our youth and our elders. A gentle reminder, all our presenters, except for one, are new to Second Life. So please be patient. Hold your thoughts and questions until they're done presenting. They need to concentrate. Thank you. Now Carla and Idiko will introduce our first speakers. I'm trying, Carla.
I am here to provide an English translation for Carla's introduction.
E sejam bem-vindos ao Simpósio de Saúde Mental 2024 da Virtual Ability.
Hello and welcome to Virtual Abilities 2024 Mental Health Symposium.
Eu sou Carla Colasso, sou do Brasil.
This is Carla Colasso and she is from Brazil.
E na RL, particularmente, não possuo uma deficiência.
In First Life, she doesn't particularly have a disability.
Porém, convivi na infância com uma tia e um vizinho que eram deficientes físicos e cuidei de um adolescente com paralisia cerebral.
In her childhood, she helped an aunt and a neighbor who were both physically disabled, and she took care of a teenager with cerebral palsy.
Atualmente, faço trabalhos voluntários e aqui na SL gosto de passear e levar a palavra de Deus às pessoas.
She currently does volunteer work, and here in SL, she likes to walk around and bring the Word of God to people.
Hoje, gostaria de apresentar a doutora Esther Gachuri, que trabalha no Departamento de Psicologia na Universidade Internacional da África, além de ser professora e psicóloga de aconselhamento praticante.
Today, Carla would like to introduce Dr. Esther Gachuri, who works in the Department of Psychology at the Africa International University in Nairobi, where she teaches and is a practicing counseling psychologist.
Também gostaria de apresentar a doutora Wambugu, que é professora de longo prazo, consultora e terapeuta no Departamento de Psicologia da Universidade Cristã Pan-Africana de Nairobi, Quênia.
She would also like to introduce Dr. Wambugu, who is a long-term teacher and consultant and therapist in the Department of Psychology at the Pan-Africa Christian University in Nairobi, Kenya.
Ela é terapeuta de casamento e família e trabalha nas áreas de saúde mental, a saber, perda e luto, mediação só para citar alguns.
She is a marriage and family therapist and works in the fields of mental health, namely loss, grief, and mediation, just to name a few.
Hoje, a doutora Esther e a doutora Anne estarão a palestrar sobre o tema a percepção dos idosos sobre seu bem-estar em igrejas tradicionais selecionadas no Quênia.
Today, Dr. Esther and Dr. Ann will be speaking on the topic, the perception of older persons on their mental or their well-being in selected traditional churches in Kenya.
Lembrando a todos presentes para não digitar e falar, enquanto nossas palestrantes estiverem falando.
Reminding everyone present not to type or speak while our speakers are speaking.
Agora, gostaria de dar as boas-vindas à doutora Esther Gachuri e doutora Anne Wambugu.
I would like to welcome Dr. Esther Gachuri and Dr. Ann Wambugu.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I am Dr. Esther Gachuri, and my co-presenter is
Dr. Anne Wambugu. We are speaking all the way from Nairobi, Kenya.
And we are so delighted to be in this conference. And thank you for inviting us. Now, we will be presenting, and the outline runs as follows. We look at the topic, our topic. We also look at the problem statement, the research objective, the research question, the literature review, the research methodology. We also look at the results according to the demographic distribution. We also look at the perception of the elderly on their psychosocial well-being. We look at the implication of this study, the recommendations, the conclusion, and we will have some references. The topic is on the elderly people's perception regarding their psychosocial well-being in selected mainstream churches in affluent Karen, Langata, Nairobi, Kenya.
Thank you very much, Esther. And I do want you to look at the problem that caused us to carry out this research. The problem that gave this research its impetus was that in the global world there is a concern of the aging population, and that is confirmed by what Aris has just told us. And that concern is how their needs are put into perspective. Most of the studies on the elderly people have been done in the developed world or countries, and for that reason, the reflection reflects their environment. And we found there weren't many studies that are been done in the African Southern Sahara, and some of the studies that were done, of course, were done in the developed world. So the few studies on the psychosocial well-being of the elderly in sub-Saharan Africa were only done in Nigeria and South Africa by a few people, like Chapman 2017. In Kenya, studies on the elderly were concentrated, number one, on how the elderly people live in their rural areas. The other studies could look at the poor urban settings where the elderly people are. And the third thing, or the fourth thing, was the old people's home. People, the homes for the old people. There is scanty literature about the elderly people living in affluent areas. And that's the reason why this study became so important. And we recognized we needed to fill that gap. So the reason for this study then was to fill that gap, examining the elderly people's perception of their psychosocial well-being from selected churches in Karen, Lang'ata, Nairobi, Kenya. And what was our research objective? Such objective was to assess the elderly people's perception regarding their psychosocial well-being in selected mainstream churches in affluent Karen, Lang'ata, Nairobi, Kenya. So, because there are many churches in that region, only a number of churches were selected. And Dr. Esther can tell us the number of churches in a fair bit. Then we had this question: how does the perception of the elderly in selected mainstream churches in Karen, Lang'ata, Nairobi, Kenya influence their psychosocial well-being? That was the main question. How does the perception of the elderly in selected mainstream churches in Karen, Lang'ata, Nairobi, Kenya influence their psychosocial well-being? And as I will stop there, Dr. Esther will continue in slide 4, and we'll look at what the literature speaks about our topic.
Okay. The literature reviewed was planned in line with the objectives of the study, exploring previous studies on the elderly globally and in Kenya. Old age are those who are 60 years and above, and there were 709 million in 2019, and the number is expected to rise to 1.4 billion by 2020, according to World Health Organization 2019. That's a very big number. Now, measured by, it is also measured by the chronological age, changes in social roles, retirement, and the elderly people's capabilities, according to those people. Now, it is also influenced by economic insecurity, lack of social security. There is a lot of individualism. There is also a poor adjustment, which leads to poverty, feelings of isolation, psychological distress, and loneliness. So the elderly people's perception of their psychosocial well-being reviewed literature related to the perception about healthy family relationships, elderly people's autonomy, and of their environmental mastery. Now, the research, I will also talk about the research methodology that was used. The research methodology, the research paradigm was social constructivism. The research design was qualitative design, a phenomenological approach where we wanted to hear from what do the old people say about their old age, not just read but hear. The target population was the young old category, those who are 60 to 75 years old, and those who attend selected mainstream churches in Karen, Lang'ata area. The sample size, because this was a qualitative study, was 17 participants. 11 were in the in-depth interviews, 12 in focus discussions, 6 from the in-depth interviews, and 6 who are from a Wednesday fellowship group. A fellowship group was where old ladies come together and fellowship, praise God. The ethical assurances were assured and maintained. The method was semi-structured, interview through focus groups, and in-depth interviews. Data analysis was verbatim transcription and thematic analysis. The validity and reliability was ensured from their trustworthiness, authenticity, and operationalized through credibility, transferability, their dependability, and conformability. I'll look at the results according to the demographic distribution. This was in form of gender. In the in-depth interviews, there were 9 females and 2 males. And in the focus group discussions, there were 12 females. The age in the in-depth interviews, there were 60 to 65 years. There was 1 male and 3 females. Those who are 66 to 75 years, there was 1 male and 6 females. And in the focus group, those who are 60 to 65 years were 4 females, and 66 to 75 years, there were 8 females. So you can see the majority were between 66 to 75 years. The marital status was another which was also looked at. In the in-depth interviews, 2 males and 4 females were married, while 5 females were widowed. In focus groups, 5 females are married and 6 females are widowed, and 1 female is separated. The number of children per respondent, in the interview, 1 male and 1 female had 2 children each, and 3 females had 3 children each. 3 females had 4 children each, while 1 male and 1 female had 5 children each. In the focus group discussions, 1 female had 2 children, and 6 females had 3 children each. 3 females had 4 children, and 2 females had 5 children each. The academic qualifications, the study revealed that the respondents were well educated. In the in-depth interviews, 4 respondents had high school education, and 4 had diplomas. 1 had a degree, and 2 had master's degree. In the focus group discussion, 3 had high school education, 4 had diplomas, and 2 had degrees, and 3 had master's degree. The occupation distribution was as follows. It was also found that the respondents had professions before they retired. There were 3 bankers and 2 secretaries, 2 teachers, 1 engineer, 1 marketer, 1 administrator, and one statistician in the in-depth interviews. In the focus group discussions, there were 2 counselors, 2 teachers, 2 secretaries, and 2 bankers, and 1 administrator, and 1 statistician. The denomination, because they came from churches, different churches, the denomination distribution, the study interviewed respondents from different denominations. In the in-depth interviews, 2 respondents were Methodists, 3 from African Inland Church or the AIC, there were 2 from Catholic Church, 1 from the Presbyterian Church of East Africa or the PCA, 2 Anglicans, and 1 Baptist. And we look at the elderly perception. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. And I want to look at the findings that we looked at, all of the measurements that we were looking at. And that is the elderly people's perception of their psychosocial well-being. The first one was healthy family relationships and family relationships before old age. And the participants answered that question, and they said they had cordial relationships, raising their families, taking care of their siblings and their elderly parents and siblings lifelessly. So they had that in terms of healthy family relationships. Then there was changes in family relationships in the old age. And most of them categorized what was going on, and they said they experienced bereavement of spouses, inheritance conflicts, inadequate finances, co-residency with grown-up children, particularly when one spouse passed on, and bringing up grandchildren, elder maltreatment, and they also felt the sting of empty nests at that moment in time. The elderly people's perception of their autonomy, whereby we look at the elderly's decision-making in the old age, they responded and said they made their own decisions. Inclusion of their family members where necessary. They would include their family members just where it is necessary. Then there was an aspect of limitations to decision-making in the old age. And that was coupled with the cultural beliefs and inadequate finances, family cutoffs, lack of spousal support, and particularly when the children have grown up, then there was that emptiness in terms of making a decision and feeling alone. The elderly people's perception of their environment and the impact of the old age on the elderly people's daily activities. What the old age, they reckoned and highlighted that they go through various difficult situations, even health. Some of them, or many of them, said they were affected by arthritis. They were finding it very hard to walk or negotiate the staircase in their home. Resilience on others for, depending on the other people, if they needed to be driven from one point to the other. That was quite something they found that was very hard. What they used to do for themselves, they were seeking to be supported. Then there was the question on the family members' intervention in the environmental mastery of the elderly. And the answer for many of them was most of the elderly people had children run parents' errands, some of them. They drive them to places, even buying them cars and taking them for holidays. A few had family members who did not care at all. And at that moment in time, some of them recorded how lonely it is for themselves when they cannot be able to do what they need to do, and the children are not helping. And after those questions, we discovered some implications. In slide 8, we looked at the implications of the findings of the elderly people. Number one, the study brought out information that will help the young people prepare for the old age. Even when they are not there, then they can learn from this study. There'll be that moment when there'll be empty nest. There'll be that moment that they will need to be helped. There'll be that moment when arthritis and the backache and many other areas of the body will be aching. The study also found that the elderly need to be supported to live healthily, emotionally, psychologically, as well as spiritually, and have people who can interact with them, have healthy relationships. It also found that inheritance wrangles are distressing. Consequently, the study calls for better ways of protecting the widows, because the young people wanted to snatch what the parents had earned in their lives, and the widows sometimes are left with nothing. Also, the study shows that the church can also find avenues of addressing loss and grief in her congregation. And Esther and I, in later days after this, we wanted to see how can the church address this huge loss of the couples or the elderly. The young people, particularly women, needed to preserve their autonomy. Family conflicts killed cohesiveness in the family. In traditional Africa, people a long time ago lived together. But when the conflicts come within the family, then the family is so really fragmented and broken down. In addition, 40 spousal relationships in the early life affect parent-child relationship in old age. And because we teach a lot about the attachment and development and family life cycle, then the family life cycle at the age, then it begins to speak of what was lost in the earlier age of the old people. The church has a duty also to equip the congregants in the interpersonal and parental skills. And we are preparing for campaigns even to teach child development and attachment and how the young people need to be socialized. Culture plays a big role in people's lives, and for that reason, the church, the country, and the national governments can find forums to demystify cultural beliefs like patriarchal patronage, property ownership, and the inheritance beliefs that are oppressive. I don't know whether that is in the Western world, but this does affect many cultures in African setting. And finally, elderly people without caring children may require psychological assistance to equip them with the knowledge and abilities to find healthier ways of living, free from distressing emotional resentments. And that would be either in terms of therapy or family life cycle, or even speaking to the stakeholders in the church and in the community as well as in the government on care for the people that are elderly. And at this moment, I wanted to hand over to Dr. Esther Gachuri to continue with the recommendations that we study.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wambugu. Now, the recommendations were that the national government should have policies that ensures workers are given financial education to help them set goals well in employment. We discovered not many of the elderly people had this financial education. They didn't have the knowledge of saving and how they could take care of themselves in old age. So the national government should have that, as one of the recommendations. Now, the second one was policies to warrant that the elderly will have enough money to cushion them against poverty in their retirement. We have some in Kenya, but we felt that they should be enhanced so that by the time somebody retires, they have enough money to cushion them against poverty in their retirement. The next one was the government can also review the 2,000 shillings given to the elderly, taking into account those who also retire at 60. In our country, if you are 70 years and above and do not get any pension, then you are given 2,000 shillings at 70. But the retirement age is 60. So the recommendation was that those who are also 60 should be taken into consideration. Now, the third one was, or the fourth one was, the county government should also check the building plans that are made with the elderly in mind, and that ramps, lifts, bedrooms which are easily accessible are included. I was looking at your setting, and I can see a lot of ramps. So I think the county government is the one that checks the building plans, and so they should put this into consideration, that when people are building, they also take into account that they have the idea of those people who are entering that house. How will they access their bedrooms? How will they access their houses at the age of 60? Now, there is also mental health professionals was also another point, like psychologists and counselors and marriage and family therapists can be made accessible to the elderly to help their psychosocial well-being. That was for the government to look at. And then the other point was on religious leaders, because these were people in their church, from their churches. They should also prioritize programs for the elderly by having transportation arrangements for those who are unable to attend services. Most of them did not go to church because they could no longer drive, and they didn't have anybody to drive them, even when they had cars outside their houses. So the church should have that transportation arrangement, and the church administrators should also be checking on the elderly and having home visits in the same point. Because they are lonely, you don't know when they are sick, they might not have neighbors or anybody living with them. And the church should also try to set up a fund that helps the elderly who cannot afford the necessities. Do the minimal or the basic shopping for them. At old age, people also get sick. So the recommendation was the church should also facilitate a health insurance for the elderly. Most of them did not have health insurances. And so when you get sick, you wait to get better, or the sickness to go on its own, or you hope that someone will help you. But if they had health insurances, that would help. Then finally, the church can also organize talks and forums on healthy aging, a healthy grieving mechanism. Some of them were going through a lot of losses, and there was a lot of grief. So the church should also organize healthy grieving mechanisms and setting up structures and programs for better support for the elderly. Now, so what was our conclusion? The conclusion, the findings of the study indicated that poor health, lack of health insurance, lack of money, death of a spouse, inheritance wrangles, and children moving out of home, living in unfriendly neighborhoods, cultural beliefs, loss of social networks led to isolation of the elderly people, and it also led to loneliness, which therefore impacted on the elderly people's psychosocial well-being. Now, we had some bibliographies, some references. These were not all of them. We just picked just a few. Thank you for listening to us. And that was the end of our presentation. Thank you.
This is gentle, and I want to remind the audience to click on the box up front to get the handout for this presentation. I want to thank Ann and Esther for their excellent presentation. And I have a question, actually sort of a double question for you. Your results seem to be similar to what might be found anywhere in the world. Do you agree? And are there factors other than the cultural factors, which you've already covered, that are local to Kenya that might make your results different from similar studies in other countries? So is it similar? Do you think it's similar to other countries' results? And if it's different, what makes it different?
I would say that in spite of where we live, human beings are human beings. And from the therapeutic point of view, every person longs to love and to be loved. And we are created as social beings. I would imagine the elderly people in other countries would also experience loneliness, just like our people, our elderly are experiencing loneliness. And many other areas that we have highlighted, isolation. And having visited some countries, like I lived in Canada, and I have presented some other works in America as well as in Canada and UK, there are similar findings that can cut across the board. However, it seems to me that in some countries, the elderly care from the government is well defined, and there are also homes for the elderly in the Western culture. We have not established that because we are coming from communal community, even though the world has become global and we have become very individualistic. And unlike the days of the past days, whereby people lived in a communal setting, there is a lot of, because of global movement, then the elderly are left at home, maybe in the village, and nobody is caring for them. So I can say there are some areas that the study is similar, and there are some areas really we can see some distinction, and particularly what I've said and the recommendation we are giving to church as well as the government. But perhaps you can also share with us what your experience is that is different from where we are.
That's a good suggestion. If we have audience from several different places in the world, they could tell us that. But do most of the elderly in Kenya live at home? They don't go into care facilities?
No. Sorry, we don't have very many homes, and the homes that we have actually are church-based, and those who go there are only those who come from very poor backgrounds, and they do not have anybody to take care of them. In our cultures, you get children so that they can look after you when they are old. So that is changing. The community where this study was carried out is in affluent Karen Langata, is in Nairobi, is in the city. But even in the city, they are not living with their relatives. So they are far away, like Dr. Ann said, from their relatives. So no one is taking care of them. So you also asked, how is it different? The similarity might be old age happens to all of us, and we experience the sicknesses, the loneliness, but the difference is, like Dr. Ann said, the elder care. We don't have that much in our country. And then so what if that study was carried out somewhere in another developed country, it would reflect how those people live. But you see, the difference is we are living in a different culture, and some of the things, we have different cultures like patriarchal patronage. That would be quite different, that the man has a say in whatever happens. The property belongs to the man. So when we talk about the widows who have lost their spouses, then the relatives of the man comes and takes over the property, and the widow is left without anything. I don't think that would happen in any developed country.
Yes, and I would love to say that the laws are changing in the court of law, and there are laws that have been put currently to look at the inheritance and what the succession. So there's something good that is coming, but it's not yet there. And the government is working very hard, and the lawmakers are also working very hard about the inheritance issues.
Thank you. I have a question from Luke. Do you think the elderly people's perceptions of their psychological well-being, the implications derived, as well as current changes in traditional life traditions, have little or much to do with technology? Since technology is here to stay, do you think you will look at how technology influences elderly people's perceptions and how?
The change with the technology, we do say always change is very threatening, and the community we are living in now here in Nairobi is very fast community than the life of the elderly people. The elderly people live in what they know, but the world is very fast. And I would want you to imagine, although we didn't carry that, it wasn't one of our questions, but I would imagine the technology is not any longer a thing that they can say is good, because it's not what they are used to, but the young people are into it. So in their psycho-social imagination, it is something that threatens them, because they don't have the understanding as we do, or as the young people do.
Yeah, at the same time, I think knowing through the technology, they also know what happens to other elderly people living in other different countries. So this helps them ask for more than what they are getting from the government. And this also makes them realize that they should be treated differently. So I think in one way or the other, I think there is a positive side to that technology. It makes them know what happens to people for example, in America, how are the elderly people treated? And that could be their curiosity, or even it can also affect their psychosocial well-being in knowing that the government is not doing enough and asking for more.
Thank you. I have another question from Polaris. They ask, how has the disabled entering age requirements changed church interactions?
Would you kindly come again, please? The question.
Polaris, do you want to explain your question?
Do you want me to repeat
yes.
it?
How has the disabled... Okay. I think you have written the question. If you can repeat that question again.
Yes. How has the disabled entering age requirements changed church interactions?
Yeah, the church. Oh, you are addressing the church, yeah. With our recommendation, if the church would be able to address the recommendations that Esther has already highlighted, then the aging can find way of aging with joy, you know. But in their disability now, as they are not cared for the way they used to be cared for, then it becomes a loss and grief of their personality. But there are some churches that are doing good because they create fellowships for them where they can gather together, they can sing together, they can read the Bible together. But there are still a few things that we have recommended in our study what the church will need to do. There is much more that needs to be done. Esther, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I think that some of the most of the churches have now ramps where if you are disabled you can use your wheelchair. Some of us, I'm in that age group and I don't like climbing the stairs, so I can use the ramp. So we also have sign languages because we have online, the church projects the services online. And even in online, they also have, so they are reaching those who cannot come to church, those who are in their houses. And if there something is going on in the church, like there is a Holy Communion being taken for those who are in the churches, they are being reached from they tell them, we are going to have Holy Communion on this day. Please take care, make sure that you have what it takes to take Holy Communion. They can follow the programs from their sitting rooms or from their beds. Another thing is there are those who are those who use the sign language. So we are not exactly there. Yeah, they are there. We have sign language in our churches. We are not exactly there. But I think we are coming up, and I think we are trying, and I think they need to do much more than just so that everybody can feel included in the church.
Yeah, and we must agree that, Esther, that the government is very keen to inspect the buildings to see that everyone is included. So the churches that are being built now would need to consider everyone, even the lambs that we're talking about. So the government is very keen about everyone being included.
Thank you. I have both a statement and a question from Faith Francis. Here in America, the solution is to file them and forget them in government-sponsored housing. That is almost impossible to get. And her question is, what if they are not Christian in your communities?
I think even when they are not Christians, most of us have got, what if they are not Christians? We have something called the Nyumba Kumi, or the, wherever we live, we count 10 houses. And in those 10 houses, households, we have somebody who is in charge of, one of them, they elect, in those 10 households, elect one of them to make sure that, you know, to find out how the others are doing. In the countryside, it is very, very impactful. But in a town, in a city, it becomes so hard because everybody is in their own compound. They don't want inclusivity. They don't want to include others. But the government has tried that. Now, those who don't go to church then can belong to those households, the 10 households. Those who don't go to church might be going to the mosque. And if they are not going to the mosque, at least if they are going to the mosque, I believe the mosque has also got a way of finding out how they can reach up to them, reach the elderly. So could be much later we can do another study to find out how other faiths are doing. But as a whole, I think the government makes sure there is a chief also in an area who is supposed to go and find out how they are doing. And this was what we were bringing out, that the chief should do much more. Other than waiting for the elderly to go to them, they should go to the households to find out how many elderly people do they have in a particular place, what are their challenges, how can the government help.
I wanted to affirm that when it comes to care, we are not thinking about people who call them Christians and those that are not Christians. Sometimes their district to measure that is very lean, and I think service to all is quite a word, and therefore the church may not discriminate the people who go to worship. Furthermore, most of us from Africa, we are very religious, and most of us are are members of certain congregation, you know, and we have many churches in Africa. So I think care would be extended because they belong.
Thank you. And Janto has one last question. Does your government pay good attention to results of research such as yours and listen to your suggestions?
Yeah, there are certain researchers that when they get into the hands of the stakeholders or the government, they are able to implement. Currently, there is a law that has come up that every organization would need to have a mental health practitioner to address issues. And we are not as developed as many other countries in terms of therapy and counseling and psychotherapy. However, the government has recognized the need of mental health since the bomb blast of 1998 here in Nairobi. The issues of mental health are very carefully being looked at by the government. But coming down to our study, I think where we are, we want to speak it more so that it can come to the forefront and see how that can be responded. Mind you, the government carries a lot of needs and listens to so many people, but our seriousness is that such a study that is so important, and many other studies, we would let this be known. And we would want to present this work many more times, even in the churches, so that the findings can be known to the leaders of our nation. Sometimes it takes long, and sometimes it can be short to be implemented.
I want to thank both Dr. Ann and Dr. Esther so much. They have overcome difficulties that not many of our presenters have. The tremendous rains that have been occurring in Kenya have caused a lot of electrical trouble, and you've been just really good about learning how to use Second Life. I'm so glad we had you to our presentation today. Thank you very, very much. And audience,
we are honored. We are very grateful that you could coach us and you found it. So we are worthy to be part of this. Thank you.